On Kerry.
Over 25,000 documents.
What else about Benghazi is the Obama administration still hiding?
We know he's out trying once again to produce nuclear weapons.
Monumentally misleading.
And we know that he has a long-standing relationship with various terrorists.
False and based on no intelligence.
Including the Al-Qaeda organization.
Maybe this all does have to do with Hillary running for president.
Anybody plays politics with Benghazi is going to get burned.
Maybe 20 months ago, they anticipated that and they started covering up then.
Good to have you with us tonight, folks. Thanks for watching. You know, I've always been one to not take the bait. I'm the guy that likes to do the fishing. I'm the guy that likes to do the stories that nobody else is doing. But this one time tonight, I'm going to start with a story that I just don't think a lot of liberals in this country are terribly concerned with. But let's not be disfocused for a moment. I want to start tonight with a couple of numbers. The first number is 9. House Republicans will form the 9th Congressional Committee to investigate the September 12th attacks in Benghazi. Here go your tax dollars, folks. Today, House Speaker John Boehner selected South Carolina conservative Republican Trey Gowdy to head up this new committee. The next number I want to focus on is 1,101. Fox News has mentioned the word Benghazi no fewer than over 1,000 times in the past year. Now, one more important number, and that would be 6. Tomorrow marks 6 months away from the midterm elections. That's what this is all about. Republicans have one strategy and one strategy alone to distract the American people from the real issues for the next 6 months. They got to drive it home. This is their chance. They got a memo now that's not quite what they want, so this is the big story. Now, to keep mentioning Benghazi, the right wing basically has manufactured hysteria over the release of new White House memos, and this special committee gave Benghazi the spotlight on the Sunday news talk shows.
We didn't have actionable intelligence about 9/11. That doesn't mean it didn't happen.
If our Democratic friends are shielding the administration and trying to protect them, and if the administration tried to protect themselves, their reelection, because they couldn't stand the truth about Benghazi, then they'll get burned.
Now, that's an interesting comment by the senator from South Carolina, that there might be some members in the House who were shielding the President of the United States. Yet, on the other hand, we keep hearing about how President Obama doesn't have very good relations with a lot of House members. Who are all these shields that are out there? Republicans believe this story will fire up their base. The world will turn for them. They'll do their very best to whip up controversy to convince people to care about it. Got to care about Benghazi. Fox News will continue to give this manufactured story countless hours of coverage. You can count on it. On Fox News Sunday, Brit Hume lashed out at former California Democratic Congresswoman Jane Harman, who mocked the conservative obsession with Benghazi.
The question was whether in the aftermath of the attack, when the administration sent its UN ambassador out to explain it to everybody, and she did so falsely, that there wasn't a conspiracy to create the false talking points that she used.
I mean, it's coming from the part of the world that has a tremendous amount of unrest. Those talking points better be perfect, dude. See, conservatives equate changing the word attack into demonstration with lying to get us into a war. Now, when Colin Powell, if we can remember, made his Iraq presentation to the United Nations in 2003, he was accused of fabricating evidence and ignoring repeated warnings and pre-war Iraq intelligence. Meanwhile, Dick Cheney was out and about. Oh, yeah, he was out spreading fear about terrorism to drum up support for United States involvement in Iraq.
How do you deter a terrorist when there's nothing they value that they're prepared to defend, when they're prepared even to sacrifice their own lives in the effort to kill Americans? Where might these terrorists acquire weapons of mass destruction? Saddam Hussein becomes a prime suspect. We know he's out trying once again to produce nuclear weapons, and we know that he has a long-standing relationship with various terrorist groups, including the Al-Qaeda organization.
Now, they knew a lot of stuff back then before we got involved. I wonder what those talking points look like. I wonder if they use the word war or battle or commitment. We're talking about certain vernacular to communicate a dire situation to the American people. If Republicans, if they get control of both houses after the midterm, they'll try to stretch the Benghazi issue as far as it'll go, all the way out to another 2 or 3 years. If it's really basically their only chance to bring down Hillary Clinton. That's what this is about, to scar the president. The right wing has failed doing what? Well, they have failed to derail the conversation about the economy. They tried to, it didn't work. They failed to derail this thing called Obamacare. He voted 50 times to get rid of it. Well, wait a minute, all these numbers are coming in that are good. And Republicans basically are failing on all fronts. The only thing Republicans have got left right now is Benghazi. It's Benghazi. The conservative mission is to get the American people, that would be you, to believe Democrats are covering up for President Obama. In fact, they're probably holding backdoor meetings. Oh my, what are we going to do now? We got to protect Obama. No, it didn't happen. Although Fox News contributor George Will said Democrats will try to make the Benghazi investigation look like an obvious partisan exercise.
I do not know why at all any Democrat would want to participate in this. By boycotting it, it just becomes a redundant and obviously partisan Republican exercise. And it's only a matter of time before Democrats raise the following question. Would there be a select committee if it didn't want to have the power to subpoena the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton for obviously reasons pertaining to presidential politics?
And George Will, I just don't know why you, a self-proclaimed accredited journalist, would follow the mob of conservatives who think that this is a huge issue for America. The conservative perspective is President Obama avoided it because, well, you see, he wanted to get reelected in 2012. They're dead wrong on that, too. The reasons President Obama got reelected are because the Democrats focused on what the American people wanted. You know, caring about jobs, voting rights, women's rights, equal rights, social justice. And let's not forget the Affordable Health Care Act. And let's not forget about saving the American automobile industry. All those kinds of things drove a few folks to the polls. The majority of Americans are with the Democrats to this day on the major issues. We have 90% of Americans in this country who want some kind of background checks on firearms. We have the majority of Americans in this country who want to do minimum wage, like almost 7 out of 10 Americans. We have the majority of Americans in this country who think that Obamacare is working. This is about focus and disfocus. The President of the United States and the Democrats want you to focus on what is really important to this country for the next generation. Meantime, the Republicans, wrong on all the issues, polling across the board, want you to focus on something that is sad, it's tragic, but there's no lie, there's no cover-up, there's no conspiracy, and yet there's going to be more Benghazi hearings. Are you yawning yet? This is why Ed Schultz is not covering the story, because there's nothing there. The only thing that's there right now is for them to gin up you, the same way they ginned up the American people back in 2003 because we were 45 minutes to a mushroom cloud. Did you know that? He had WMD. He had it all. We had to go. Got to fight him over there instead of fight him here. Let's just work with the truth for once. Don't you find it interesting that everybody on Fox News thinks that Benghazi's a big story? And don't you find it interesting that not one Democrat has stepped out and said, there might be something new here. We better look at this. No. This is what happens when you have the power in the House. You can call for many subpoenas as you want. You can call for as many hearings as you want. You can waste tax dollars to the nth degree. That's what's happening here. Get your cell phones out. I want to know what you think. Tonight's question: will the Republican Benghazi strategy help them take control of Congress? Text A for yes, text B for no to 67622. You can always go to our blog at ed.msnbc.com. We'll bring you the results later on in the show. Well, let's go to one of those congressional members on the Democratic side who's out there to protect President Obama, Congressman John Garamendi of California, who sits on the Armed Services Committee. Congressman, good to have you with us tonight. John, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Ed. This thing is just going on and on to boredom, actually. The Armed Services Committee actually did a hearing. And the result was There's nothing here. They're obviously a great tragedy. But, Ed, during the George W. Bush period, there were 13 attacks on various embassies and consulates around the world. 60 people died. In Karachi, there was a death of one of our diplomats. Those were not investigated during that period of time because it was a tragedy. And also keep in mind that in the 2012 budget, the president proposed $1.8 billion for security. The House Republicans came back with $1.4 and ultimately wound up with a $200 million less money than President Obama wanted to secure it. Why? Because the Republicans refused to provide the money for security. Did that have something to do with Benghazi? Maybe.
Congressman, not one Democrat has stepped out and said there might be something here. What do you make of that?
We have much more important things to do. This has been investigated, as you said, 8 times before. This will be the 9th time. This is old news. And in fact, it's a tragedy. It was a serious tragedy. Could it have been prevented? Perhaps. But it did happen. Now, what do we need to do going forward? Do we need to investigate it again? No. What we need to do is what you said a moment ago, and that is to focus on jobs in this nation. We ought to focus for a moment on the Republican budget that just passed the House of Representatives, which blows a major hole in the construction industry in this nation by basically not funding transportation and a host of other things.
Congressman, what about this renewed fascination with Benghazi? Can you honestly say that there's absolutely nothing in these emails that would warrant any type of extra effort or investigation because the White House may have lied and misled the American people? Well, I don't think, we certainly didn't see the White House lying at all. They were trying to get the story out just moments after it happened. They didn't have all the information. We've known that. That's in the testimony. That's well known by everybody. But I think one of the interesting things that's going to happen is going to be a fight in the Republican caucus. Darrell Issa has been on this issue for years, and now they've appointed another fellow to take up a special committee. We're going to have to watch and see how these two committees work together. My guess is there's going to be a brawl between the two committees. Okay, Congressman John Garamendi, who sits on the Armed Services Committee in the House. Congressman, good to have you with us tonight. Appreciate your time. Let me turn, you bet. Let me turn now to retired Army Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, former Chief of Staff of the United States Secretary of State Colin Powell. Mr. Wilkerson, good to have you with us tonight. Do you think Americans care about Benghazi? Do you think that obviously we care about any American that loses his or her life overseas? But where are we with this, Colonel? Do you really think that there is a smoking gun there, as Lindsey Graham had stated?
Well, of course Americans care, at least the great majority of them do. I care. I think the Accountability Review Board, headed by career ambassador, I might say, Tom Pickering, and former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mike Mullen, both men for whom I have respect, a great deal of respect, as a matter of fact, and Dick Schenck, with whom I worked for 4 years at the State Department, who was the real horse of the ARB, found substantial problems in the rotation of diplomatic security agents, in assistant secretariat leadership in 1 or 2 cases, and in most especially and most substantially the host nation, the Libyans, who are really, we forget this, they are the real security for our consulates and embassies, the host nation people, and they fail miserably. So I think this has been looked at. It's been looked at in spades. The one aspect of it that may not have been looked at, that Tom Pickering talked about at his press conference, was the classified aspect. And they weren't allowed to look into that for reasons you and I know. And that classified aspect may show that the CIA had more culpability than we're seeing right now. I suspect that because it's usually the case when the CIA is involved, as they were so substantially. But this issue has been looked at. It has been looked at thoroughly, and recommendations have been made. And let me just add that when I was with Secretary Powell at the State Department, we knew that one of the biggest problems we had, challenges we had, starting with the Crow Commission and before and moving up to this ARB now, reconfirming it, is that Congress cuts the money allocated for security enhancement to State Department every time we go and do the budget.
So had there been the proper allocation of money, the security would have been different, correct?
I think it's correct to say that had money been afforded in accordance with these blue ribbon panels that we've had over and over again every time we have an incident, if money had been let out in accordance with the way those recommendations went, we would have a lot better security situation in every consulate and embassy that the United States runs in the world today, and that is a statement of fact.
Colonel, is there normally a fight or a bickering at the bureaucratic level about how, in a crisis, the country is going to talk to the American people? I mean, it just seems to me that the conservatives are looking for perfect wording here. And if they don't get what they want, they're going to think. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, no, you're right. Of course. It's very difficult to handle a crisis. And you take the talking points from whomever you can get them who is on the scene. In this case, as I understand it, the CIA provided most of the talking points that, for example, Susan Rice, as UN ambassador, used. Those talking points turned out to be wrong, as they often do in the blush of first action. You can't ever get it right right up front. So I don't find that to be a great problem. And I do find it to be an enormous problem in my political party. The Republicans. I'm still a Republican. I find it an enormous problem that they go after something like this, Benghazi, tragedy that it was, and they don't go after something that is a colossal tragedy like the war crimes of Richard Bruce Cheney.
Okay. What do you think should be done if the Democrats ever got total power in the House and Senate? Should they go down that road, or is that just a day too gone too far?
I think this has been I think this has been looked at. I think the decision by President Obama not to look back was lamentable. I can understand why, in terms of political reasons, he did it. But I think we're going to regret the fact that we actually condone torture in the world. We set human rights and international criminal justice back an eon. We were supposed to be the leaders. Now we're the laughingstock of the world. This has significant repercussions for the United States, and George Bush and Dick Cheney are largely responsible for it. And the fact that I was a member of that administration will haunt me to the grave.
Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, I appreciate your time tonight and your candid response to all of this. I appreciate your time. Thanks for being on the Ed Show.
Thanks for having me.
Remember to answer tonight's, you bet. You remember to answer tonight's question there at the bottom of the screen. Share your thoughts with us on Twitter at Ed Show and on Facebook. This is how you cover Benghazi. They're trying to disfocus the nation. Coming up.